To Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and Thisday Live begins now. Coming up in the next hour. Counting the cost of losses of lives and property arising from the hashtag EndSARS protest, the shooting by the military at the Lekki toll gate plaza in Lagos, and the complete breakdown of law and order nationwide. What urgent steps need to be taken by all concerned? And tension and uncertainty in Nigerian states as mobs loot COVID-19 palliatives even after President Muhammadu Buhari's call for calm. We begin here in Nigeria, where an investigation by our sister company, Thisday newspaper, revealed that 62 people were killed nationwide in the protests against the now dissolved Police Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, which metamorphosed into an agitation for improved governance in addition to justice for victims of police brutality. Official figures, which Thisday assessed Friday night, showed that 51 of those killed were civilians, while 11 others were policemen. It also emerged that over 1 trillion may be required to rebuild public and private property destroyed by hoodlums in Lagos alone, in the aftermath of the military shooting at unarmed protesters at the Lekki toll plaza. According to reports, the shooting by the security forces to disperse protesters at the Lekki tollgate plaza in Lagos triggered more violence, resulting in deaths, largely in the state. Vandals attacked public and private property as well as those belonging to politicians, now not just in Lagos, but also in other parts of the country. Meanwhile, the Inspector General of Police, Muhammad Adamu, yesterday ordered the immediate mobilization of all police operational resources to bring an end to the wanton violence, killings, looting, and destruction of property across the country. Joining us to talk about the shocking events of these past 2 weeks, which almost pushed Nigeria to the brink, is Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi, a senior advocate of Nigeria. He will also be talking to us about a statement signed by himself and other concerned Nigerians titled Our Youth and the Unfolding National Crisis, the Need for Urgent Intervention. We'll take a short break now. When we return, Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi will join us on Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel, where we're still waiting for Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi, who is our special guest, to join us. Let me quickly introduce our panelists for today. Professor BOLA AKINTERINWA, Director General, Bolytag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. YEMI ADAMOLEKUN, Executive Director in Office of and MODELE SARAFA-YUSUF, Arise News Analyst. Well, once Professor Ajayi joins us, we'll link up with him. But let's take another story. Starting on Friday, thousands of poor and disenfranchised Nigerians, under the guise of the hashtag EndSARS protest, looted several warehouses where COVID-19 palliatives meant for distribution to needy persons as a way of ameliorating the impact of the COVID pandemic had been stored. Very few cities in the country were spared, as warehouses located in Lagos, Osogbo, Ilorin, Kaduna, Jos, Benin, Calabar, and elsewhere, among others, were attacked and looted by riotous mobs. A warehouse in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, almost suffered a similar fate, but for the quick intervention of security personnel who drove back the angry mob. Information gathered so far indicates that the palliatives comprising rice, noodles, vegetable oil, and other food items had been procured by the private sector-led coalition against COVID-19, also known as COVID, and distributed to various warehouses a month ago, following which it was the responsibility of the state governments to distribute the palliatives to indigent Nigerians. But instead of doing so, food items worth billions of naira and with a limited shelf life were kept away from those that need those palliatives the most. Why were the palliatives not distributed as intended? Is the question many are now asking. Was this a case of incompetence on the part of state governments, poor logistics, or was this the handiwork of corrupt state government officials who were bent on diverting what was meant for the masses? Very curious questions there, very serious questions there. MODELE SARAFA-YUSUF, it's good to have you back on Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show. You've been away for some time. But let me start with you. I mean, the major concern in the last 48 hours has been the target on the homes of politicians in Oyo State, in Lagos State, in Cross River State, in Plateau State, and we have seen houses being looted. We have also seen warehouses where COVID-19 palliatives have been kept also being looted. This is another phase of the NSAS, NSWAT protest. Why do you think this is the case? And this looting, some people say nobody should call it looting, that this is a case of the Nigerian masses taking back that which belongs to them, which the politicians decided to sit upon.
Well, Ruben, it is not as straightforward as that, in my opinion. Let us start by saying that looting under whatever guise is wrong. I also think that we need to establish the fact that some of these palliatives that are in the warehouses were to have been distributed, but they were only given to the states about a month ago. The biggest problem that I see here is the inability of politicians and the people in government to distribute things like this in a fair and equitable manner and in an organized way. The biggest challenge that they have is logistics and politics. I have been opportuned to have some insight into how states function. And one of the things that would be a challenge in this kind of case is how to distribute these palliatives. And it's so much. It isn't just a few bags of rice that they need to give out. It is hundreds and thousands of cartons of Indomie. Who gets what? And what tends to happen in these cases is politics tends to overshadow everything because then they begin to worry about their constituencies, the political affiliates, who gets what and how. That would be the reason why these things have been in the warehouse. It's just incompetence, really, that would be that we can attribute this to. The incompetence of people in government and government itself, the fact that they just can't seem to handle things on this scale. COVID did what they needed to do. They started the distribution of these palliatives to states in late August, early September. It's been more than 1 month and these things have been sitting in the warehouse. It is not true that these things have been in the warehouse since April, May, because I spoke with SARAFA-YUSUF, the CEO, Dangote Foundation, and one of the coordinators of the COVID initiative. I spoke to her on the View from the Top, a program on Arise News around August. And that was when this initiative of sending palliatives to 1.7 million households in Nigeria began. It was after that they started taking these things to states and handing them over to the state governments. Why are they in the warehouses? My guess is that they have not been able to align their logistics it would be the reason they're still in the warehouse.
Well,
do they want to sit on it? I'm not so sure, but it is still incompetence in government that is responsible for this.
Well, I mean, MODELE SARAFA-YUSUF is making a point that many state governments have made and that spokespersons for COVID have made. I read a piece attributed to Dr. Adetuton, who was also involved in COVID. He's the MD of First Bank. And he made it clear that, look, many of these materials belong to COVID. That's the private sector coalition. And that those materials were handed over in September, specifically on September 22. Some state governments have also said they got those materials on September 22, and they were in the process of distributing. So it's not as if anybody was sitting on those materials. However, the federal government side, I've seen some people who are pro-federal government saying, well, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs has been vindicated because she had made it clear that those materials were handed over to all the states of the Federation and that it was not the business of the federal government to distribute those materials. But YEMI, why is it that politicians are being targeted? Senator Teslim Folarin in Oyo State, Senator Gershom Bassi, Senator Victor Nduma Egba in Calabar, Senator Lee Elimoke also in Cross River, also in other parts of the country we have had politicians' homes being attacked. I mean, is this about the politicians or there's something else we're dealing with beyond COVID-19 palliatives and NSAS and so on?
Well, I mean, there are multiple layers to this thing, and I think we do ourselves a disservice when we try to isolate the problems. There's a fundamental problem of the fact that citizens don't trust politicians, number one. There's a second layer that for the most part politicians have been dishonest and provided an enabling environment for distrust. There's a level that we are the poverty capital of the world, or even I'll stay with that. But there are a lot of people, in simple terms, there are a lot of Nigerians who are in poverty. And the enabling environment or the governance structure that we run seems to entrench that, from the fact that we don't pay attention to education. University students have not been back in school since February or March. We just came out of a pandemic. So we can't speak about these things and not talk about them in the way that they are interconnected. So to speak to palliatives generally, so federal government did theirs, state governments did theirs, private individuals did theirs, churches did theirs, local organizations did theirs. So over the course of COVID, there have been many different layers of intervention. If I take Lagos State, for example, so when we did a rough calculation using percentages of people who live below $1 a day, we can conservatively say that there are at least 5 million poor people in Lagos, given Lagos' estimated population of 22 million. But Lagos came out to say that they were giving food to 250,000 households. I mean, that's a drop in a bucket by any stretch of the imagination. So starting from there, and a lot of people who did not get or benefit at that time, there will be distrust. So when you now stumble on a warehouse, even if the food came in last month or came in a week ago or whatever it was, for those who feel that government is distrustful, believe that this food wasn't shared and was there, it's a lot to try and explain how this has come about. Secondly, we're a country that does not count. There is no state governor in this country that can tell you exactly how many people are in their state and their demographics. I have X number of women, X number of men, X number of children under 5, blah, 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 blah. We don't count. So it becomes extremely, extremely difficult to be able to know when you have a situation like this and you're trying to reach a particular segment of people who need help, where they are, so you can get the help to them in a timely manner. So, and then on the back of the NSAS protest, and if not anything, I mean, sort of a sequence of events, so to speak. So NSAS was very targeted. We were talking about, young people were talking about police brutality, which others joined because a lot of people across socioeconomic strata and age brackets have experienced one thing or the other at the hands of the police. Citizens then use that opportunity to begin to air the rest of their grievances. And the simple reason is this, and I think we should not forget this. From where I sit, and I'm very clear about this, the federal government of Nigeria was not interested in solving the SARS problem. They were interested in making it go away. And young people saw that very clearly, was why, even though it was announced that SARS was dissolved, They continue to protest because you cannot tell me you have dissolved an arm of the police, that you have disbanded before, reorganized before, split into two before. Every year for the last 5 years, you've done something. So even if this dissolution is new in a certain way, okay. But on that same day that you dissolved it, police in Abuja were shooting, tear gassing, and waterbombing citizens. So the body language of the government was not that we were serious about doing anything. And the time that then elapsed, we then went from 1 day to 2 days to 3 days to 1 week, then provided grounds for other citizens who had grievances for other things to then come up on it. So I just wanted to say that. So let us just be clear that this has nothing to do with NSAS. Absolutely not. Citizens then added their own grievances to it, and it took a life of its own.
So it's not just about end SARS, it's also about end bad governance,
there you go,
end impunity,
there you go,
and government irresponsibility.
Yes.
But there's a question I'll ask you before I go to Prof. I know Prof has written a lengthy essay on the subject today, and I'm going to ask him to explain what he means by definienda in a newspaper, which is a very technical term.
Indeed.
But Prof, I'll come to you, just get ready. There's something I need you to deal with very quickly, briefly, which is the issue about fake news. When Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu came out yesterday to say that he's not missing in action and that he's still a jagaban of Lagos and Nigerian politics, he talked about fake news. And I thought I saw something from you under your auspices as Executive Director of Enough is Enough. You apologizing that fake news has been part of this issue. Do you think it's fake news that is responsible for the violence that we see?
At all. I think there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation means that, I thought this was here. It was actually there. Disinformation means a deliberate attempt to deceive. And what we saw in this whole NSAS process was a deliberate attempt for what I would say is government and government agents, and I say that unequivocally, to deceive people in terms of what transpired, especially with Lekki Tollgate. We watched on Instagram Live what transpired that night. By the next morning, there were disputes, it didn't happen. No, the military wasn't there. But the Lagos State governor has said the military was there. The Lagos State governor has said that there was gunfire. The Lagos State governor has said that at least 2 people were dead. So anybody who then has any additional questions about that, I would say take it up with the Lagos State government, because indeed it's Lagos State property. But there is a challenge of people then taking advantage of people's fears, people's ethnic biases, people's dishonesty to seed information that colors the way they think. And as a general population, we need to be very careful about that. I'll leave it at that.
Well, so you are putting the burden for fake news on the shoulders of government.
Not on this particular issue, Lekki. There's a deliberate attempt to discolor what people saw and what people experienced.
Okay, Prof, let me come to you.
Case.
You wrote on page 16 of Thisday today an article titled Ending Police Brutality with Military Brutality, the definienda of a difficult future in the making. Please, can you define what that definienda is? Because that's not the language that ordinary people like us speak. And how is the future of Nigeria difficult in the making? Very briefly.
Yeah, thank you. You see, definienda is a little bit different from dynamics. Dynamics, that is...
What is the difference?
What are likely to inform, to influence, future scenarios. While many people were caught unawares about the killings of peaceful protesters, I was never caught unawares. Why? Because of the factor of definienda. Definienda, as a Latin word, means, is taken from the word what defines, what is most likely to define. Dynamics means what has, all right, defined. Definienda is what is likely to define. Now, definienda, the Nigerian military made it clear before the killings. The Nigerian military warned the potential saboteurs, people who are most likely to destabilize. They made it clear that they will support President Muhammadu Buhari. So in this case, they said, and they warned, they used the word warned, people who are most likely to destabilize to be careful. Now, that is a point of definienda. A notice was already given. So in this case, when there was killing, normally, there's no way an operation, crocodile smile.
6
wouldn't clash with those who are protesting peacefully. So definienda in that particular case is just an idea of what we are likely to be faced with, the future scenarios. So I try to build the scenarios in the future, and I discover that the future cannot but be difficult in light of the identified elements in that definienda.
Yeah, this difficulty of the future is a big issue. But Modele, let me come back to you quickly in just 2 minutes. What is the way forward? You have been on this side. You have also been on the government side. What should government do? Because I see an impression on the side of government flowing from the president's speech that government is threatening the people, government is giving warnings. Even the Inspector General of Police has told his men, go out onto the street and take over the public space. Is that the best way forward?
You know what they say, he that is down needs fear no fall. When you start threatening people who have no hope, who have no ambition, who have nothing to lose, then the kind of things that you get is the kind of thing that happened when the looters and the arsonists and the vandals went on rampage. Government has to be careful. Government has to be really, really careful. People have been pushed to the wall. Let me speak to one of the things that happened and to which an allusion was made earlier. The fact that government is lying to people. They're actually gaslighting people. Gaslighting is a verb in which that means manipulating by psychological means into questioning their own sanity. If government would go out and say there were no military men at Lekki toll gate, people were not shot, nobody was killed, and you expect the whole nation to believe that. And people are like, but I saw it. Well, I saw it on Instagram Live, but I saw pictures. Well, it may not have been that many people because there was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of disinformation on both sides. But government needs to come clean. Government needs to be humble.
Yes, Modele, sorry to interrupt you. Government needs to come clean. Government needs to stop gaslighting.
They need to be humble.
And be humble. On that note, we'll take a short break here on Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor BOLA AKINTERINWA, Director General, Bolytag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. YEMI ADAMOLEKUN, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and MODELE SARAFA-YUSUF, Arise News Analyst. And now joining us is Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi, a senior advocate of Nigeria, who will be talking to us about a statement signed by himself and other concerned Nigerians titled Our Youth and the Unfolding National Crisis, the Need for Urgent Intervention. Thank you for joining us, Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi. We've been waiting. It's good to have you at last. Thank you.
Good to be on the show. Good evening.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I already introduced the statement that you and 40 others issued, dated October 22, 2020, in the aftermath of the crisis at the Lekki toll gate and the developments across the country, looting, youth revolt, and deniers, warnings, threats. If you could just, for the benefit of our viewers, offer some of the main highlights of those 4 points, 4 major points in that statement that your group issued, where the points are more than 4. Point number 1 had so many subsections, but For the benefit of our viewers who may not have seen that statement, what is your position on that group called Concerned Nigerians?
Well, Concerned Nigerians, as our name implies, are non-partisan, independent, concerned Nigerians that believe in the coat of arms of the nation, which is unity, peace, and progress. And so the sum and substance of what we put out to our head of state and the commander-in-chief of our armed forces is that he should listen to our future. He should listen to 65% of our population. He should listen to the people that voted him into office, and that he should come out and speak, which he did. And we suggested to him a number of things, apart from coming out to speak. Mm-hmm. We suggested to him very strongly and sincerely that he should look at his security architecture and all his security chiefs. Secondly, we suggested he should begin looking at proper and real reform in governance. We called for an independent inquiry as to the happenings on what we call Bad Tuesday, what others called Black Tuesday, and of course, what happened the day after in Zamfara State, where 20 or 22 of us were killed in cold blood by bandits. So we call for these major things, and we honestly hope that the head of state will look at these things and look at them seriously. More so since that statement was issued, that so much has happened. We've seen anarchy on the streets. We've seen serious evidence of a failing state. The fourth point which we mentioned in our statement, which is reform of governance, making sure that the state is present in our lives, and therefore something to do about replacement of all those officers that are at the head of the various agencies responsible for law enforcement and for security in the country.
Well, one other point that your statement pointed out is a condemnation of the lootings, of the nihilistic, anarchic manifestation, mutation of the protest. But you then talked about the religious and ethnic implications. Now, if you just comment a little bit on how all of this protest has taken a religious and ethnic dimension. How do you mean in that regard?
Well, what we underscored and what was of concern to us is what YEMI ADAMOLEKUN spoke to about earlier. Serious disinformation coming from all quarters. And, you know, she mentioned it coming from the state itself. Obviously, there's disinformation coming from all over the country and even from within the youth as to the happenings in the country. And coming out of that and coming into that was the bad water of ethnic and religious differences. And what we therefore underscored was that, head of state, please come out and use the pulpit of your office as the father of the nation, as the chief servant of the nation, to speak to us to calm nerves, to speak to unity and to speak to peace. But rather than that, what I consider as a failed opportunity is that the president then spoke and alluded to these things, suggesting that it was the youth, the peaceful, well-organized, highly disciplined youth that were pushing this agenda, when indeed it was disinformation from outside their ranks that was pushing that. And we think it's something that we must kill. We must breathe peace. We must preach harmony. We must preach unity. We must look at the strength of our diversity and the richness of our culture, of our tongues and our tribes, and all those great things that make us Nigerians?
Well, I mean, I'm impressed by the fact that, your group, Concerned Nigerians, which reminds me of Concerned Professionals, during the 1992 pro-democracy protests. It's a high-powered panel of very distinguished Nigerians. We have Olisa Agbakoba there. We have Bishop Matthew Azan Kuka, Father George Usani, Malam Yusuf Ali SAN, Malam Kabiru Yusuf. We have YZ Yahoo. We have Jibrin Ibrahim. We have your good self. We have so many other Nigerians there, including Professor Adele Jinodu, a very old and distinguished teacher. We have Professor Patutomi, A.B. Mahmoud SAN. We also have Amina Saliu. I was excited seeing her name there. Funke Adekoya, Femi Falano SAN, and Anwalu Yadudu, Professor. I hope he's back in the country. The last time I spoke with him, he was abroad. But you made a point, as part of your demands, that the President of Nigeria should sack some persons. Maybe you were referring to service chiefs, people who have not delivered. Are you guys really optimistic that the President of Nigeria is willing to sack anybody on account of this protest?
That is not something that the group has considered. As you can imagine, these elders and distinguished Nigerians all came together just with a single narrow focus on the issues of the day. And, there wasn't a debate as to that. We're hoping the president will be not nonchalant, will not be aloof, and play the ostrich. The call for him to change his service chiefs is not new. This has been going on and raging in the press and in the public for quite a while. Lots of people have said that even if they were competent, they have outlived their usefulness. They have stayed longer than they ought to stay in the office and have caused some dislocation in the rank and file of the armed forces. So we hope that, as I said, the president would show some empathy, would show some reflex, as Father Bishop Matthew Cook said, some reflex to listening to what is on the street, reflect to true security report that we do have serious problems in the country. We have service chiefs that have not been able to put down banditry in our nation, banditry on the high streets, kidnapping, sacking of villages, murder of our people, and insurgency in the northeast. Service chiefs and security officials that were idle and were unable to stop total breakdown of law and order in all our streets, in all our towns and villages in the past 2 days. It is absolutely amazing that one of the monuments of justice in this country, one of the pillars of any society, is the courts. Lagos High Court, which used to be the Supreme Court of Nigeria, and beside it the Court of Appeal, which then was the Supreme Court of Nigeria, a 5 minutes walk from the former headquarters of the Nigerian Police Force, Lion Building, which still is a fortress. 7 minutes drive from Area C, where the AIG in charge of Zone 2 sits, another fortress. 10 minutes drive from Dodon Barracks, from Obalende Barracks. And the High Court, the Court of Appeal, City Hall, Nigerian Ports Authority, all within 10 minutes drive of all these mornings, and we had not one man in uniform come out. It tells us that clearly the head of security, the head of the armed forces, the head of the police, and all these agencies are not capable.
Well, Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi, your second demand, or perhaps the third, is that the protests should be law-abiding. And we have seen a degeneration. When you say the protesters should be law-abiding, who is your group speaking to at this point? Those young men who are already setting the homes of politicians ablaze, who are attacking warehouses across the country, saying they are looking for COVID-19 palliatives. How does your group intend to speak to that group after the horse has bolted from the stable? And when you talk about governance reform, exactly what kind of reform are you looking for?
Mention that we're looking at two groups, protesters and demonstrators. I'd like to describe the youth that organized, disciplined, well-fashioned,
I can hear you.
That disciplined, well-caught-out group of young men and women of this country that were demonstrating against brutality and injustice that we suffer in the country, that were complaining about the 100 million poor, complaining about illiteracy and the army of unemployment. One group. And then you call them protesters. These are people, Nigerians, that were created by misgovernance, that were created by the brutality that the children were talking about, that were created by End SARS. These are Nigerians, graduates, some of them, that have been on the streets unemployed forever. These are Nigerians that have lost all hope and therefore been pushed to criminality, pushed to things that are terrible. So there are those people. And so, yes, in speaking to these two different people, we continue to tell the people that are demonstrating that they should continue to speak up and demonstrate the way our head of state himself was demonstrating and protesting before he became head of state. We know that election after election, he demonstrated on the streets. He called for the resignation of Jonathan. And he demonstrated in Oyo State before the governor of Oyo State at that time. Every time we vote, we demonstrate because we vote people out. We demonstrated against Jonathan when we voted him out of office. It's a demonstration. And so we ask our youth to continue to exercise that right to demonstrate. As Atedopita Side said, weaponize that protest and make sure that at the next election in Ikorodu, your voice is heard for the Senate in Ikorodu or Lagos West. Let your voice be heard, young people. Make sure it is your candidate that wins that election, whoever that candidate is. Whether it's APC or PDP or maybe not them, another party. There's a new party I see, Young People's Party. Let your candidate, let him come forward and let us see you in action. And any other election that is hard, local government, House of Reps, House of Representatives, or 2023, make sure that your voice, your vote is heard. Demonstrate then. That's what we're saying. Do it lawfully, in accordance with the Constitution and the laws of this country. And to our children that have been displaced by misgovernance, that have been driven to poverty, we call first on all of us that have advantage, that have been beneficiated by society, that are lucky to be employed, to go out there and educate our fellow citizens that there is no point in destroying public property. There's no point in burning the courts because that is the hope of the common man. We should go out there, all of us, not the public sector, all of us in the private sector, we should go out there and educate them. We should spend our resources the way some businessmen, Dangote, and the banks, and Rabiu, and all those good men and women put together billions and billions of naira, built field hospitals, and then filled all these warehouses with food that will feed millions of people for months. Do that again. Let us go out there and feed fellow Nigerians with our substance. We've got to give of what we have. We must all know that whatever we have is a gift from God and we must use it for the benefit of the people. We cannot say we are rich. We cannot say we are well-positioned. We cannot say we are in authority if people around us are poor, are displaced, and disadvantaged. But then we turn to government. Misgovernance just must stop. Your time is up to continue to misgovern us. to continue to bring brutality to our lives. SARS is not about Special Anti-Robbery Squad. It is about SARS, that plague of misgovernance, mediocrity, corruption, nepotism, and all those things that have brought this nation to its knees. It is about that thing that has made us a scourge rather than a home to every black man in the world. It is about that thing that has made us not enjoy the fruit, the milk and honey of this land, because God has blessed this land. Every square inch of Nigeria is blessed with resources that we can harness to make us indeed not just one of the largest populations in the world, but one of the best economies in the world. And that is what our governments must do. There must be rule of law. There must be an end to impunity. Gosh, there's so much this government can do. There's so much Buhari can do with his pen. Why can't Buhari sack everybody in his cabinet and employ young people? Look at it. In the week in which we had Lekki, young boys that went to Covenant University and Babcock University started a business 5 years ago, sold their business for $200 million. $200 million. Do you know what that is? And do you know how many other Nigerians have businesses like that? There's so many. There's so many young men and women with brilliant ideas that will change our world and will change this world.
Quite true. Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi. Quite true indeed. Well, that was Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi. It looks like we lost the connection there, but he has said a lot that will constitute food for thought. And all of us are concerned Nigerians. Every concerned Nigerian is a citizen and a patriot, not for government, but for country. And we all share one common ideal to move this country forward and to have a better future for all Nigerians. Thank you very much, Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi, SAN, for joining us on Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show. We take a short break now. When we return, the program will continue. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Now, still with me in the studio, I have Professor BOLA, AKINTERINWA, YEMI ADAMOLEKUN, and MODELE SARAFA-YUSUF. You just listened to that very passionate, very concerned, let me use that phrase, contribution by Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi of the Concerned Nigerians movement. Professor AKINTERINWA, let me start with you. Help us quickly further stretch some of the points that he made, or you may disagree with him. If you feel
Professor KONYINSOLA came up with a typology of the actors. He distinguished between protesters and demonstrators. He gives the impression that a protester may not be a demonstrator, and I disagree with him. You can protest on the basis of some ideological positions without necessarily going to the streets, to demonstrate. And when you demonstrate also, you demonstrate on the basis of your conviction that you have something informing your coming out to demonstrate. All right? Protest is a function of a disagreement with a particular idea. So I do not share the classification or the differentiation between a protester and a demonstrator. Why I have to raise this particular point is that I agree with him essentially that NSAS is not just simply about coming out to protest against brutality, to put an end to police brutality, but that it is more encompassing. These are issues I raised in my column too. And when MODELE and YEMI came up with the idea of this misgovernance and people not showing sincerity of purpose, I've said a number of times on this platform that governance in Nigeria, particularly political governance, is largely predicated on dishonesty of purpose. It's never based on any objective consideration. It's very fraudulent. And then when we do not differentiate between true protesters and those who were looting. It is most unfortunate. There's no way anybody should try to describe the protesters, the youth. The youth are not responsible for this looting. And if you look at the speech of Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari, he tries to insinuate that the protesters, the genuine protesters, were the looters, were the people, they are the miscreants on the road. Now, he said, if you look at the logic, the presentation of his speech, what he did was that he said they started peacefully. We tried to negotiate with them, etc. But at a point in time, they did not listen. They turned violent. Mm-hmm. It is not the protester that turned violent. They're completely different from the miscreants who took laws into their hands. So under no circumstance will anyone try to give the impression that the protesters were violent, were doing what is wrong. I agree with Professor KONYINSOLA that, look, at the end of the day, the protesters, the youth, should try as much as possible to make themselves relevant, better organized for better days to come.
Well, Modele, let me come to you. You also listen to Professor KONYINSOLA Ajayi. Very briefly, what's your take on some of those key issues that concerned Nigerians have raised?
The most important thing for me right now is what we need to be doing going forward, what government needs to do. Government needs to create employment. There really is there are no two ways to say that. Government needs to realize that the unemployment rate in Nigeria is not sustainable. The National Bureau of Statistics Q2 report for 2020 states that the unemployment rate is 27%. Underemployment rate is 28%, which means that combined 55% of Nigerians are not earning enough to keep body and soul together. 55%, more than half of the population. So how they're going to do, whether it's trader money, it is whatever money. Farmer money. Something needs to be done. Something urgent needs to be done. And you know, it is not just the uneducated that are unemployed. I'm told that 23% of people who have a second degree are not employed. So you spend almost 20 years in learning, getting educated, and then you come out and you're not employed. That needs to be sorted. That needs to be dealt with. Yeah, another thing that needs to happen is that government needs to rebuild trust.
Okay, rebuild trust, provide employment, address the unemployment crisis. Yemi, I think you should help us bring this home finally.
Quickly, on the panels, I think it was quite disturbing what former governor of Lagos, Asiwaju Ahmed Tinubu, said when he arrived. One, that he was silent while he watched a state that he formerly governed get burnt for a week, and then showed up yesterday and said he's been around all along. Right.
And that is the Jagama.
Yeah. And then secondly, he then said that the protesters have questions to answer. At the time when we're asking people to come forward with cases against police brutality, there was a threat, there was a connotation of a threat in that doesn't bode well for a panel that's meant to deliver justice.
But he's not a member of the panel.
But he's a former governor of Lagos State, and he should not be speaking in that tone. He sets a really negative tone around the panel. And then secondly, I think we need to state it very clearly that the security services pulled back and did not provide security. So in the idea of the looting and all that, and place that blame rightly where it is. And lastly, the whole idea of goading and encouraging Mr. President to do what is right because he's not aware of things, for me, is very worrisome. If the president of the nation did not see what happened and then comment appropriately to the events that played out.
Well, I'm sure if we spend another 1 hour, we'll still be on this subject. And that's understandable because we're also Nigerians and we're citizens and we believe in our country because we don't have another one. It's still our country. You've been watching Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati from my entire team here in Lagos. It's bye for now. And thank you very much for watching.